The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madame, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore." 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast, upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore." But the raven still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy upon fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, "Nevermore." This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press on nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still of bird or devil, whether temper sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore. Desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still of bird or devil, by what heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting, get thee back into the tempest, in the night's Plutonian shore, leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken, leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door, take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from out my door, quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting, on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadows on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted, nevermore. The theme of The Raven is that one can cause one's own distress by dwelling on his or her losses. This is evidenced in that as the poem progresses, the main character becomes less sane. This is shown by the diction that Poe uses. As he loses his sanity, the main character begins to use more emotionally charged words, starting out at words such as bleak, dying, and burning, and ending with words such as fiery, evil, devil. The tone of the poem is gloomy and the mood depressed, as is evidenced by the words dreary, weak, weary, bleak, dying, ghost, sorrows, terrors, etc., and most notably, nevermore, and so on throughout the poem. These words all express the gloomy, depressing emotions surrounding death, which is a central topic in this poem. Poe also uses a lot of imagery and powerful diction in his play to enhance the motif of death in order to support the theme. One example of this is setting, which he describes as the bleak December. These words bleak and December are indicative of death, as will be explained later in the symbolism of the poem. The phrases fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core, tempest tossed thee here ashore, and take thy beak from out my heart, all express violence that could result in death just like the death of Lenore that the main character is obsessing about. This crazy obsession the main character has with death proves that he is, in fact, in distress, and his willingness to focus on it indicates that he is bringing about his own distress. Poe uses symbols throughout his poem to focus on death, thus enhancing the theme. In the first stanza of the poem, Poe says, "Once upon a midnight dreary." Poe chose midnight because midnight is the darkest part of the night, and night is often associated with death. Thus it is symbolic of death. In the second stanza of the poem, the time of year is described as December. He chose December because its freezing temperature kills animals if they are exposed to it for too long. Thus, it is, as well, symbolic of death. In the seventh stanza, Poe describes the raven as perched upon a bust of Pallas. Pallas is also known as Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom. Throughout the rest of the play, the raven says nevermore, indicating that he will never see Lenore again and must go on with life. In offering such sage advice to the main character, the raven is embodying Athena and acting parental. Thus, the raven is symbolic of a parent. In the eighth stanza, the main character refers to the night's Plutonian shore. This is symbolic of death, in that Plutonian refers to the Roman god of the underworld, Pluto. Shores are often representative of the mystery of what lies beyond them, and night is often associated with darkness and emptiness. This symbolism the main character makes further proves the obsession of the main character with death, which is causing his distress. Poe's life also may have had something to do with the grim mood of the poem. During the course of his life, he experienced many deaths. His mother and father died of tuberculosis. His foster mother and wife died of tuberculosis as well. Poe uses death of women throughout his poems because in his life many women important to him died. This lends itself to the theme in that Poe most likely realized that dwelling on the deaths of loved ones only caused him distress. This realization is the theme of the poem.
Hi, I'm Nithin and I'm going to be analyzing Annabel Lee. Bring out the poem. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with the love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, the love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the daemons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I light on by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Annabel Lee is written by Edgar Allan Poe. Through the many details the narrator of the poem uses to express his love to Annabel Lee and his resulting mental deterioration, Poe explains the theme that while love is capable of resulting in elation, it may also cause extreme sadness due to the issues of love not going the way one would essentially want it to go. Poe uses various symbols in this poem to convey this fact. First, Annabel Lee herself. Through Poe's description of her, she seems to be someone flawless and perfect, which is never encountered in real life. Therefore, Annabel Lee herself must be a representative of that which is flawless and perfect. Because we know such a person to not exist in real life, the author must therefore be an unreliable narrator. The reason he is an unreliable narrator is because love is blinding him. Again, going back to the theme of the poem itself, that love can result in elation. A second symbol Poe uses in Annabel Lee is the sea. The word by the sea is repeated many, many times throughout the poem. It's written in every stanza. This is emphasizing its importance, and as we progress through the poem, we see the sea's representation go from cheerful to dangerous and evil, starting from here, when I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. It seems very happy near the sea, imagine the beach and all of that, but then as you go over here, to shut up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea, and going here, and so all the nights I just lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea begins to have a more ominous tone. We see the sea's representation go from cheerful at the beginning to dangerous and evil at the end. From and so this changing is also due to her to this love of Annabel Lee, because at first when she's alive and happy, then he thinks that everything is good for him, but after she dies, then he starts to think that everything is against him. A third symbol to use are the angels. Normally they are meant to be kind and benevolent, but after he mentions Annabel Lee's death outright right here, the narrator sees them as bringers of destruction. Here he says, yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee, because he is absolutely convinced that the angels who were usually benevolent were envious of her and the narrator, and so killed Annabel Lee. The reason he says this is another example of how everything can seem full of schadenfreude because of his love for Annabel Lee. Another device Poe uses in this poem is punctuation. As in the beginning, when he is discussing Annabel Lee's and his relationship, you only see very few punctuation marks, only the necessary ones that detail the end of an idea or a sentence. But as you continue through the poem, you actually begin to see more punctuation marks, such as dashes and parentheses and exclamation points and all of this, and this makes it more like the narrator is actually confused at this point, and he needs to begin to recollect his thoughts. And in the case here of the angels killing, actually bringing up unlikely thoughts in order to latch onto some reasoning of Annabel Lee's death, because you see here he's getting more and more confused actually going to the death of Annabel Lee. And he's so sad that he's trying to blame her death upon something, and this is all due to his love for her. The mood of the poem also shows a switch similar to the which is again similar to the theme. The mood is at first happy, right here, but then switches to loss and depression, right here. As the happy moments are only few and at the very beginning of the poem, it seems that the narrator is more obsessed with the depression instead of the happy memories, and he keeps referring to Annabel Lee as his bride at the time when they were both children. So right here, he says I was a child and she was a child, and not long after she died, and then all of a sudden he says my life and my bride. So his love for her seems to be increasing on an exponential basis when he reflects on the memories of her. Thus, the tone of the poem would probably be insanely painful mourning. Poe's life may also have something to do with the mood of this poem. For example, Poe's mother and father both died of tuberculosis, and Poe married a young woman similar to Annabel Lee in this poem, and she died of tuberculosis when she was very young, and Poe apparently was very distraught and wandered around and did not know exactly where he was in life. This is similar to the narrator in this poem, just sitting beside Annabel Lee's sepulchre all the time. It talks about Annabel Lee being a child and Annabel Lee being killed, and so the life of Poe may actually have something to do with this poem.